There's a pattern in the global economy that almost no one talks about. It's not in your school textbooks. Your financial advisor won't mention it. And the news media? They don't even understand it. Yet this hidden rhythm has quietly predicted every major financial collapse of the last 2 centuries with frightening accuracy. It foresaw the panic of 1873. It foresaw the crash of 1929. It foresaw the meltdown of 2008. And now, all the same forces are converging again, pointing directly to 1 year, 2026. Not 2030, not sometime soon, 2026. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's mathematics. It's history. It's human behavior repeating itself in long, predictable cycles, just like the changing of seasons. Because economies, like nature, have seasons too. Periods of growth and abundance, followed by decay and renewal. Spring, summer, autumn, winter. Each with its own signature: optimism, expansion, excess, and collapse. And this rhythm, this economic heartbeat, was first uncovered a century ago by a Russian economist named Nikolai Kondratiev. In the 1920s, Kondratiev studied over 150 years of economic data: prices, interest rates, wages, commodity cycles. What he found was astonishing: a long wave that repeats roughly every 40 to 60 years. Each wave carried 4 distinct seasons: spring, recovery and rebuilding; summer, growth and prosperity; autumn, stagnation and speculation; winter, collapse and renewal. His discovery became known as the Kondratiev Wave, or the K-cycle. And what's chilling is that every single one of these winters from the early 18th century onward ended with a deep financial crisis. The early 1800s, banking collapse; the 1870s, railroad crash; the 1930s, Great Depression; the 1970s, stagflation crisis; the 2008 meltdown. Each was a winter phase, a great reset after decades of excess. And according to the K-cycle, we are already deep into the next winter right now. Let's walk through these seasons briefly. Spring begins after crisis. Debt is destroyed. Optimism slowly returns. New technologies rise. This was the 1950s after World War II. Rebuilding nations, booming families, highways and televisions. Growth is steady. Prices are stable. Hope is reborn. Then comes summer, the boom. The technologies from spring mature. Productivity surges. Everyone feels rich. Inflation creeps in as demand outpaces supply. This was the 1960s. Full employment, rising wages, confidence that prosperity was permanent. But no summer lasts forever. Debt piles up, prices climb, and speculation begins. That's when autumn arrives, the deceptive calm before the storm. Growth slows, inflation bites, central banks raise rates. People chase easy profits, not realizing the system is stretched thin. Think of the 1970s and 1980s, stagflation, oil shocks, the first cracks in the post-war order. And then, winter. Debt collapses, bubbles burst, banks fail, markets fall. This is the cleansing phase. Brutal, but necessary. It resets the system for the next cycle. That was the 1930s. That was 2008. And that is what's coming again. But here's the key. The 2008 crisis should have been our full winter. It should have cleansed the system, destroyed the bad debt, wiped out the excess, reset valuations. Instead, we refused to let winter happen. Governments and central banks stepped in. They dropped rates to zero. They printed trillions of dollars. They bailed out the very institutions that caused the crash. And by doing that, they didn't stop the cycle. They only paused it. They pushed winter further down the timeline. Now, after 15 years of artificially cheap money and record debt, winter is back, and it's going to be colder than ever. Let's break down why 2026 looks like the critical year. The original Kondratiev waves last around 50 to 60 years from one peak to the next. The last major peak, the start of autumn, was the late 1960s and early 1970s. Add 50 to 60 years, that lands us squarely in the 2020s. But the timing becomes even clearer when we overlay other cycles, the debt supercycle and the generational cycle. The debt supercycle runs about 70 to 80 years. That's how long it takes for societies to forget the pain of the last big debt crisis and pile up new mountains of leverage. The last one peaked in the 1930s. Add 80 years, you get 2010 to 2020, right on schedule. Then there's the generational cycle, roughly 80 to 90 years, or one human lifetime. That's how long it takes for the generation that lived through a depression to die off, and for the next generation, who never knew real hardship, to make the same mistakes again. The last generation peak? 1929. Add 90 years, 2020. So the Kondratiev wave, the debt supercycle, and the generational cycle, all three are now aligned. That's rare. And when cycles align, the resulting collapse is never mild. Everything points to 2026 as the epicenter. Let's talk evidence. The yield curve inversion, one of the most reliable recession signals in history, inverted in 2022 and stayed that way for more than 2 years. Every U.S. recession since 1950 followed an inversion. None were false alarms. And when the curve finally uninverts, as it did in 2024, recession usually follows within 6 to 18 months. That puts the danger window squarely between March 2025 and March 2026. Then there's corporate credit spreads, the difference between safe and risky borrowers pay for loans. When that gap widens fast, it means investors are running for safety. Those spreads began widening in late 2023 and are now accelerating, another red flag for late 2025 through 2026. Money velocity, how quickly cash circulates, has been declining since 2022. Historically, every major recession begins 24 to 36 months after money velocity peaks. That points to, you guessed it, early 2025 to early 2026. And then there's the commercial real estate time bomb. Over $1.5 trillion in property loans must be refinanced between 2024 and 2027, most of them written when rates were 2%. Now, those same properties face 7 to 9% refinancing costs. They can't pay. Defaults will spread to regional banks. Banks will fail, and when credit freezes, the real economy falls off a cliff. The biggest refinancing wave hits in the first half of 2026. That's the trigger zone. This isn't just a bubble. It's an everything bubble. 2008 was a housing bubble. 2000 was a tech bubble. 1929 was a stock bubble. But after 2008, central banks inflated everything: stocks, bonds, housing, crypto, collectibles, even art. So when this bubble bursts, there's nowhere to hide, no safe sector, no clean escape, because every asset class rose together on the same tidal wave of cheap money. And when that wave recedes, everything goes down together. Global debt has crossed $370 trillion, nearly 3.5 times global GDP. The United States alone owes $36 trillion, with annual interest payments exceeding $1.2 trillion, more than defense, more than Medicare, more than anything else. And because interest rates are high, those payments are exploding. Within 5 years, interest alone could consume 40% of federal revenue. That's unsustainable. There are only 3 ways out: default, politically impossible; austerity, socially explosive; inflation, quietly destroy the currency. Guess which one governments always choose? The Federal Reserve is trapped. If it keeps rates high, debt collapses. If it cuts rates, Inflation returns. There's no escape hatch, only a choice between pain now or catastrophe later. History shows they always choose delay. That means the Fed will likely start cutting rates again in 2025. Markets will cheer, investors will say the worst is over, but it won't be over. It'll be the final rally before the collapse, the calm before the storm. Here's how it will likely unfold. The crack, late 2025 to early 2026. Something breaks. Maybe a major bank, maybe a government defaults, maybe a corporate debt wave hits. Officials dismiss it as contained. They always do. Contagion. Spring 2026. Confidence evaporates. Credit markets freeze. Defaults spread. Markets plunge. Intervention. Summer 2026. Governments panic, cutting rates, printing trillions, launching bailouts. Markets bounce briefly. People believe the storm has passed. Secondary collapse. Fall 2026 to 2028. Reality sets in. The interventions fail. Markets crash again, deeper this time. Unemployment surges. Social unrest spreads. The true winter phase begins. Reset and renewal 2029-2030. After the chaos, the system stabilizes, the debt is purged, new industries rise, and spring returns. Every Kondratiev winter ends the same way, with destruction, then rebirth. Understanding this cycle isn't about panic, it's about preparation. The people who survive and even thrive during these transitions don't rely on luck. They study history, they act early, they reduce leverage, they build cash reserves, they keep their emotions in check. Because when everyone else is chasing gains in the late autumn, that's when the smart ones quietly move to safety. When everyone else is selling in panic during winter, that's when fortunes are made. So what should you do? If you're heavily exposed to stocks, start scaling down. Not panic selling everything, but rebalancing. Move 30 to 50% into cash or safe short-term assets. If you own leveraged real estate, ask yourself, can I handle a 30% drop in rental income? If not, consider reducing exposure while valuations remain high. If you carry credit card or personal debt, pay it down fast. Debt in a deflationary crisis becomes a trap. Diversify differently, not across the same paper assets, but across fundamentals: gold, farmland, energy, essential services, and even skills that generate income no matter what happens to markets. And just as importantly, prepare mentally. Because when the media screams collapse, when portfolios are down 50%, when everyone you know is terrified, you'll need the strength to see what others can't, that winter always leads to spring. Every 50 to 80 years, the world goes through this cleansing. A generation forgets, excess builds, and the cycle resets. The warning signs are flashing everywhere. Rising defaults, tightening credit, collapsing savings rates, widening credit spreads. We've seen this pattern before, and if history repeats, 2026 will be the breaking point, the moment the old system gives way to the next. But remember this: the crash isn't the end, it's the beginning. The destruction clears the field for new growth, new technologies, new wealth, new beginnings. The question is, will you be ready to endure the winter so you can flourish in the spring? Because the cycle doesn't care about opinions or optimism. It just turns, endlessly, predictably, inevitably. Winter is coming, and 2026 is closer than you think.